Hey there YouTube, I'm Bubbins, and welcome to what will undoubtedly be my longest non-gameplay video released thus far. As part of my 1,000 subscriber celebration, I let the community pick from a selection of videos I wanted to make, but didn't really have time for. As you may have noticed, most of my videos are around like 10 to 12 minutes. There are some that I want to make that are longer than that, but it's really hard to fit those into my busy schedule. Hence why there's been slightly fewer videos lately, so sorry for that. But everyone wanted a big Final Fantasy XIV tips guide, so for the past few weeks I've been chipping away at this. In total, I have 37 tips and tricks that you may not have known, some of which the game never really even tells you about. They cover topics from combat to crafting, and from ease of use to quality of life improvements. So let's dive in. My first tip is a very simple one, but one that is easy to forget. If the bubbles on the bottom right hand of your screen are white, that means the Spiritbond level is maxed out. I'm not talking about the 4 giant squares, rather I'm talking about the 2 lines next to it. That's your gear. If you're like me, you always forget to extract your materia and reset the Spiritbond. Sure, there's that little animation that plays, which is what usually reminds me, but if all of them are maxed out, there's nothing to play and you can go weeks without realizing it. But it turns out the status of your gear is on your screen 100% of the time, and there's really no excuse. If one of those green bubbles turns white, that means your gear is ready for extraction. It's amazingly simple, yet something I completely forgot about until someone in one of my video comments was like, "Hello?" Speaking of, one of the things that I always did when there was something to extract, I would open my character sheet, right click on the item, extract materia, accept, etc, go through each piece of gear. Turns out, you don't have to do that. Instead, go into your general actions and drag the extraction hotkey onto your bar. Clicking it will show you all of the gear you have, including the ones equipped in your Armory Chest and in your inventory, and let you extract them all without having to examine the status of each piece of gear. By default, it tells you what percentage it's at, so if you want to go in there and, add 2 percentage points just so you can get the materia, go for it. Now a dip into the settings. Final Fantasy can get really busy, especially in high-level content. I really do recommend turning off or limiting most ally spell effects. Leave the crucial ones on so you can see healing fields and such, but as a whole, you really don't need to see all of my Dragoon explosions and dragons as I send them out during my rotations. Turn them off and make your life a little easier. Not only is it more readable, but your computer will thank you as well. Now maybe this isn't for everyone. Some people like to manually control where they go. But 90% of the time I'm using Autorun just by clicking a button on the side of my mouse. Hotkey it to whatever you'd like, but setting up Autorun lets you poke around in your inventory, move your skills, or anything else while you're trudging through empty hallways and dungeons, or literally anywhere else. It can be super useful when you're trying not to be left behind. For that reason alone, I recommend having it available even if you don't use it all the time. You've probably heard this a few times, but if you're new, remember to check your achievements for rewards. The game showers you with achievements. Make sure to open the tab, put on all of the filters, and check all the ones you've earned that have rewards. Lots come with different things, from mounts to titles to glamour pieces. There's so much in there, and you don't want to miss out. This is the basics of the basics, and I'm pretty sure the game explains it at some point, but maybe it's just so easy to forget over hundreds of hours. Lots of players like to focus on the main story quests exclusively as they play through the game. While you're going from zone to zone, you'll notice there are yellow and blue quest markers around as well. Those yellow markers are well and truly just side quests, which provide little reward and are mostly about the zone story. Blue quests, however, always unlock some kind of new feature. That can be things like a tribal quest, a new dungeon, a new raid, the Dome and Enclave, its Guardian Restoration, the list goes on and on. So, in short, if you want to unlock new stuff, go do blue quests. I am constantly surprised by how few people click on the individual timers in the Timers tab. Most of these can be clicked on to provide more details, from the specific housing plot you bid on, to what the current supply and provisioning missions are, to what every single custom delivery vendor is looking for this week. It's super handy and will save you a bunch of time in the long run. Just open them if they have that little icon and save yourself that time. So if you're not a crafter, there's really nothing you can do about this unless you have a friend who's willing to help. But if you have the skills, or a friend who has the skills, it's always better to repair your gear by hand rather than spending gil at the mender. For a long time I knew it was cheaper, like it would save me money. But that's not all it really does, because when gear is manually fixed, it gains 100% durability from whatever it's at, up to the cap of 200%, rather than the 100% that menders will do, which makes it so you don't have to repair as frequently. Another thing that not everyone understands is how the game handles alt classes. Technically, it is more time efficient to level up one class a bunch and then go back and revisit old classes. That's because Final Fantasy provides a 100% XP bonus to any combat job that is lower than their max job level. For example, if you have a combat class at 90, all of your other classes will receive a 100% XP bonus from level 1 to 79, though that does drop down to 50% from 80 to 90. However, this only applies to XP from defeating enemies, battlecraft leave quests, fates, duty roulettes, and deep dungeons. Now, some of you may like the more traditional movement settings, but one of the first things I recommend you do is go to your character configuration and swap movement settings from character-based to camera-based. The default setting makes it so that when you press S, your character walks backwards slowly, which certainly isn't ideal in combat. Camera-based movement makes it so that when you hit S, your character turns around and runs towards the camera, which I think is far more intuitive and also easier. Another kind of hole that I fell into was the way I handled teleporting. For a long time, I would fast travel by clicking on the minimap and then navigating that way, zooming out to the world and then back into where I wanted to go. Do yourself a favor and just hotkey the teleport menu. It's so much easier, displays every location and price, and getting used to it will save you a ton of time. You can even set up your Aetheryte ticket usage here, so if you wanted to automatically redeem whenever something costs more than 1,000 gil, whatever that is, you can do it there. So much easier. Now, this isn't so much of a tip as it is just like an acknowledgement that it exists. You can maybe turn the combat music off. I mean, I love the music of Final Fantasy XIV, especially the various zone themes. But that constantly gets interrupted by generic combat music, so I went ahead and turned it off. Even if you turn off the normal battle music, you still get the special boss themes and dungeons and stuff, so you really aren't missing out. I don't know, it's not like a huge game-changing tip, but like, sometimes I just want to hear my zone music even when I'm in combat, alright? One really good tip for new players is to turn off the box that stores all of your newly obtained items in the Armory Chest. In short, that's the place where if you click recommended gear, the game will automatically pull from anything's in there and optimize your loadout. So obviously you don't want stuff in there that you're never going to use, and there's so little space, like 35 slots for each piece. It also leads to confusion where you could possibly end up getting rid of gear that you actually need. So rather than dealing with that, turning this setting off makes it so that all of your gear drops go to your inventory instead. Then, after finishing your activity, you can evaluate each piece, sending the ones you want to your armory chest and leaving the rest in your inventory to be sold, broken down, or exchanged for seals. It just saves you a lot of brain space. You don't have to keep track of like what's new, what's not new, what do I need to look at. They're conveniently sorted into 2 piles and you can just do whatever you need to do. You may have noticed, if you're new to the game, that if you go to log out anywhere that's not a city, there's like a 20-second logout queue. Like, wait. That's there for a variety of reasons, but you really don't want to log out there because when you log in, chances are your XP bar at the bottom is green and showing a moon. This means you're well rested and will receive a 50% bonus to all XP you earn until you exceed that green bar. That bar only increases if you log out in sanctuaries like cities and near aetherytes. So make sure you always log out in one of those areas, and the way you can tell if it's one of those areas is if you don't have that logout queue. If you're constantly spamming duty roulettes, chances are you're tired of watching or skipping the same cutscenes over and over and over. In your character configuration setting, there's actually an entire section dedicated to cutscene skipping. You can skip all previous viewed scenario cutscenes like dungeons and transportation videos. You can skip it all. No need to wait for it to load, hit escape. The game will just plop you right back in instead. This is the shortest tip in the entire video. Mostly because I feel like it took me a long time to learn this, but whether you're sitting or standing, you can just type CPose, that is, in chat to change what pose you're in. There's even a setting in the settings that randomizes that pose for you after a short period of time, making it so that you change stances somewhat naturally. Just convenient to know if you want to use it, I guess. Moving on. So the default setting of Final Fantasy makes it so that your inventory is in like 4 different tabs, right? But why is it in tabs really? Just to take up less screen space? I don't know. But either way, it just takes time to look between them. You end up going back and forth, so why not just show it all at once? Go to your item settings, swap the inventory interface to open all, and then you can see all 4 tabs at once. I always like to include this tip just because like I fundamentally underestimated, even as someone who is very into optimization and XP and leveling, I really underestimated how useful duty roulettes are for your combat jobs. From an absolute perspective, the main story roulette gives about 50% of an XP bar, half a level. An alliance raid gives 40%, leveling roulettes give about 40%. As well. The 50, 60, 70 roulettes give 20% and trials give about 14%. Normal raids are much worse at like 6. If time efficiency is your thing, however, trials give almost 5% of an XP bar per minute thanks to some really short early game trials. Leveling gives 2.7, alliance gives 2.4. The main story gives 1.4, and it just gets lower from there. They're on screen. Just look at them. I read them and it's sounding mind-numbing. Just look at the screen. That's the most efficient stuff. Prioritize as you will, but don't skip out on doing at least a few of them. They're super useful, especially when you get to later levels, because 50% of a level 81 bar is a hell of a lot more XP than 50% of a level 2 bar, right? If you're into earning in-game rewards, there are a ton that are locked behind MGP and the Gold Saucer dailies and weeklies. And those are an easy way to get them. At a minimum, do your mini cactpot scratch-offs each day, and then do the fashion report and jumbo cactpot at the end of each week as well. In total, you should earn about 75,000 MGP per week with little to no effort. Bonus points if you use the boost from Squadron or your free company. Now, as someone who tried working with the default key bindings, my hands started to hurt pretty fast using the regular keys and then shift plus those keys and then control plus those keys. It sucked. After some experimenting, as you may have noticed, I now use 1 through 5 and then Q, E, R, F, and G. My next bar is Shift plus all of those, with my final bar being 6, 7, 8, 9, and then the dash. By no means am I a super hardcore DPS with an optimized rotation, tracking my uptime and stuff like that, but at a minimum, find something that works for your hands, because the defaults don't work for everyone. There will be something more comfortable, and even after 600 hours like I did, you can learn to switch. You can, and your hands will thank you for it. Gardening tip. If you're going on vacation and taking a break from Final Fantasy, but are worried about your plants dying, put those garden patches into housing storage. Doing so pauses the current timers. While they won't continue to grow, they also won't waste away and die. Save your jute. Put them in storage. If you're very early in the game and really don't know how to get any kind of mounts and want to earn them for yourself rather than buying them off the market, head on over to the achievement vendor in Gridania. He has 3 mounts which you can get fairly easily just by exchanging some achievement points, which you earn automatically, and then you just have to talk to him. Those include the Behemoth, the Ahriman, and the Deathclaw. Those were my first 3 mounts. They're very easy to get. Go ahead and get them, add them to your collection so you're not just limited to the default Chocobo. You know, I see a lot of people completely ignore grand companies. By all means, you can. But I recommend everyone unlocks grand companies and then do the supply and provisioning missions, since they're an incredibly underrated method of grinding your crafting and gathering classes. Essentially, every day the company will ask for a specific item or items, depending on your class's level, from each of the various crafting and gathering classes. Oftentimes, these can be purchased on a market board for low prices, or you can visit another server for even cheaper prices and then just turn them in for a quick XP farm. As a reminder, high quality items are worth double the XP in seals, and starred items are worth even more. Just try to do as many as you can. You don't have to break the bank. Again, you can hop on over to Universalist to check markets on your data center and beyond. Although I never stress about it that much, just do it when it's convenient for you. Craft it, buy it, whatever you need to do. Just know they're there. They're an excellent way to grind those crafting and gatherings. I've said this in another video, but I ranked up every single one of those classes to 70 without ever having done any outside grinding. I literally did it through just that. Though most of it, like 80% of it, was spent simply, purchasing the items I needed, since I'm kind of into money making as it is. If you don't have money, you can craft them yourself. Whatever is convenient. Just know they're there, know that they're good, do them. When you're doing that, another tip I have, you can use this only sometimes. I don't know why it's not everywhere, but one of the big pain points when doing things like the supply and provisioning missions is writing in the item name, like searching it, typing it in. It's hard to remember sometimes. Thankfully, with supply and provisioning missions, and with even some other things, you can just right click it and then copy the item name and then paste that into the market board or your recipes or wherever it is. You don't have to type it in. Weirdly enough, this isn't available everywhere for some reason, but just know that it's sometimes there and you can sometimes count on it. Pretty early on, Final Fantasy introduces you to Desynthesis. And I remember spending a ton of time trying to figure out what that was. How can I earn money doing it? Is it worth all these things, Googling all this stuff. It's especially complicated because in the past it was worth it, but there are all these posts from 2015, 2016, oh yeah, do it. Oh, and then the recent ones tell you not to do it. But in short, it's probably not worth leveling up. It can be, somewhat useful to get rare raid materials when breaking down raid weapons, but outside of that, it's largely just going to cause you to sacrifice a bunch of items that you would otherwise sell for seals or gil. So don't feel any kind of pressure to level it up. So let's say you send out a retainer, and that retainer brings back a material that you've never heard of. You don't know how to get it, nothing. What do you craft with it? If you're ever not sure what to do with a particular material, just right click it and search for recipes. The game will then show you all of the recipes you have access to so you can put it to good use. Like I said, this is especially useful for rare materials that like make level 1 glamour gear items, you know, the ones that are worth like 10, 20, 100,000 gil. That way you can figure out if you want to sell it or if you want to save up a few of them and craft them into something worth even more. On that note, for any item that can be crafted, you can simply right-click it and open the recipe tree and the raw materials list. This will then let you make sure that you have all of the needed materials before you start crafting. You can even input how many you want. Like if you want to make 50 of these things, it'll tell you, oh, you need like 600 ore, that kind of thing. Then you can move over to the recipe tree and craft all of the prerequisite items before moving on to the final stages and finally crafting the item. You ever walk around Gridania, Limsa, wherever, and see people with weapons glowing on their back? For the longest time, and by the longest time I mean until like 2 weeks ago, I just thought I didn't have a weapon capable of that yet. Even if they glow while they're equipped, whenever I would put them away they weren't. I was like, oh, I guess I just don't have one that glows on my back. Nope. Turns out, it's just a bug that you can take advantage of with a macro. It's simple, just type in /mb/sit/wait1/sit. Execute that. Now your weapon will glow on your back. Another kind of quick tip is that like sometimes it's perfectly fine to do content unsynced. I remember when I first started, I only wanted to do content genuinely. You know, I wanted to beat it for real. Like, why unsync things? But it's particularly hard to do some of that old stuff, especially from like Realm Reborn and earlier, because they're not super popular activities anymore outside of people doing their roulettes. So if you ever need to do something like one of the Realm Reborn trials or Wondrous Tales or something like that, ultimately you could do this with dungeons too. I've just never done it with dungeons, but you can do it with dungeons. If you're powerful enough to do so and you don't care about enemy loot drops, go ahead and run it unsynced. If you just want to get it out of the way, like the queue is like 16 minutes. It'll take me like 2 minutes to run through it myself. I'll just unsync it. You'll still get the chests, but you skip the mindless ad killing. So just don't feel guilty about doing it, really, is all I'm saying, because it's common. I know a lot of people don't really poke around in that area of the duty roulette settings, but you can also level limit your roulettes. So if you're tired of doing the same introductory dungeons over and over, you can turn on limited leveling roulette, and the game will only choose duties that are within 8 levels of the lowest character in your party. For example, if you're level 70, nothing below level 63 will ever be chosen. It's super handy for when you're tired of doing all the old stuff and just want to play some of the newer content again. On the other hand, it may increase your wait time, especially for DPS. But if you're on a tank or a healer, turn it on. You ever want to just like stop and smell the flowers in the dungeons, look around, examine the scenery? Turns out you can do that. Just turn on Explorer mode, it's in this setting here too, and then you can load into your favorite dungeon. There you're free to G-pose and take pictures. You can even summon a striking dummy to get your Warrior of Light in some combat poses and then make it invisible. In G-pose, it's kind of great. There's some really beautiful places. Might as well take some pictures there, right? I covered this one just a few weeks ago in a dedicated new DPS players video. But if you're a melee DPS, learn the difference between flank and rear. Some of your abilities require you to be behind the target, others require you to be in the flank, which is actually off to either side. So learn the difference between those two, learn which skills require that. And to maximize your DPS, you want to be in the positions when casting the ability. There's no need to wait in the animation. And because you're frequently bouncing back and forth between these two areas, it's common for melee DPS to stay right where the two zones meet, moving back and forth as needed. On that note, you may find yourself wondering, well, there's like the circle's different. There's no rear, there's no flank, it's just completely closed and the arrows inside the circle. That means positionals don't matter. You don't need to bother moving between flank and the rear. You don't have to move try to optimize your positioning. Just get to the safest spot and focus on your rotation. All of that stuff will activate as per normal. This is even true for when the boss is so big there's only a half circle. You don't have to worry about where you are attacking the boss. Everything will still count. Again, if you watched my new DPS tips video, a lot of this stuff at the end here is going to be a repeat, but damage happens based on the indicators, not on the animations. Essentially, the damage and effect of enemy abilities are applied when the cast time finishes and the AoE disappears, not when the animation plays. The second that AoE disappears, you're safe to jump back in and do more damage, even if the actual animation is just starting. As a note, this is also true for you. You don't need to wait on animations to finish casting. Damage is applied as soon as you click the button. If the next ability in your rotation is up, you're free to move on. It might not seem like much, but removing 1 or 2 seconds between every ability over the course of a long boss fight or a dungeon can make a really big difference. Last tip. I didn't know this was a thing for the longest time, so chances are, new players might not either. You see that party list in the top left of your screen? Chances are the tank holds aggro. In this case, it's a healer, but whoever holds aggro is currently displayed as an A. But should something happen to that person, like if it's a tank, should they die, the enemy assigns priority based on who is drawing the most aggro, and that's indicated by like 2, 3, 4, etc. The bar under this shows how close you are to taking aggro, and this listing is essentially a de facto way of seeing how much damage you're doing in comparison to the other DPS characters in the party. While there's no true DPS meter and DPS tracking apps are against the terms of service, you can kind of see how good you're doing based on the aggro meter and the party list. Boy, that was a lot of tips. I hope some of that was helpful, new, entertaining, whatever. I just tried to throw together as many things as I could. I have a lot more settings to stuff like that, but at a certain point I had to cut it, like this video can only be so long if I ever want to get it out the door. If you watch this far, oh my god, thank you so much. I appreciate the support. Just watching, it's an incredible amount of support. That's essentially all I have for this video. If you want to support the channel, just like and subscribe, please. It's super helps. Unless, of course, you want to directly support the channel, in which case I have a Patreon, and there's also YouTube memberships, right here on YouTube if you'd rather keep everything on this platform. But yeah, either way, that's it for this video. I'm so glad to finally get this out. Thank you so much for all of my first 1,000 subscribers, and now I'm at 2,000 subscribers, so thank you to the first 2,000 of you. Here's to 5,000, I guess, right? We'll be there before we know it. I think that's it, though. I'll see you next time.